Moscow, November 1985. At a crowded apartment party near the Arbat, KGB Colonel Boris Smirnov felt untouchable. He had just exposed 3 American agents. He believed the woman beside him was only a nervous Soviet secretary. Within 2 hours, he would be dead. What Smirnov didn't know was that the kiss he pursued had already started a silent countdown. The weapon wasn't a gun or a blade. It was a cosmetic tube altered to deliver tetrodotoxin, and it required consent, proximity, and perfect timing. This is how a CIA operative killed a KGB colonel without leaving a mark. Operation Crimson Kiss. Irina Volkov was born in 1956 in Leningrad, the daughter of a dock engineer who disappeared during a corruption purge when she was 11. The knock came at 4 in the morning. Her father was gone by dawn. No trial, no explanation, no body. That disappearance taught her the first rule of Soviet life. Survival depends on silence. By age 16, Volkov had learned to make herself forgettable. Teachers described her as competent but unremarkable. Classmates struggled to remember if she'd been in their year. This wasn't shyness. It was camouflage refined through necessity. The CIA found her during a language exchange program in Vienna in 1978. She was 22, translating technical manuals, living in a shared apartment near the Naschmarkt. What caught their attention wasn't her language skills. It was her reaction when a case officer staged a compromising scenario designed to provoke panic. Volkov's heart rate never changed. Her expression remained placid. She simply waited. Recruitment took 4 months. Assessment took 2 years. By 1982, she was deep cover in Moscow, working as a low-level secretary inside the Soviet Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Her personnel file described her as non-remarkable, which in Moscow was the highest operational compliment. No handler contact for months at a time. No family ties to exploit. No emotional attachments to threaten her legend. Volkov possessed one defining operational skill: emotional invisibility. She could be present without imprinting herself, desirable without attachment, trusted without intimacy. Associates later described her as pleasant but forgettable, helpful but never memorable. This made her dangerous in ways conventional agents could never achieve. During training at Camp Peary, instructors noted one peculiarity. Volkov kept a small notebook of fabricated memories, details of a life she never lived. A childhood trip to Sochi that never happened. A university boyfriend who never existed. She studied these false memories like scripture. When asked why, she said only that forgetting who you're pretending to be was the first step toward forgetting who you actually are. By October 1985, Volkov had been in place for 3 years. She typed memos, filed reports, attended ministry social functions, and passed nothing of value to her handlers, because nothing of value crossed her desk. She was a sleeper asset, dormant by design, waiting for the moment when proximity to power would matter more than access to secrets. That moment arrived when Colonel Boris Smirnov was promoted to head the KGB's Second Chief Directorate Counterintelligence Section for Western Europe. The CIA's Strategic Operations Division operated under a doctrine called selective node elimination. The logic was straightforward. Hostile intelligence networks functioned like neural pathways, and removing a single critical node could collapse entire operational chains without the diplomatic cost of mass expulsions or public exposure. Smirnov had become that node. Between April and September 1985, he had personally exposed 3 American intelligence officers operating in East Germany, Poland, and Hungary. 2 were declared persona non grata. 1 was arrested and spent 8 months in interrogation before a prisoner exchange. The methods Smirnov used suggested he had penetrated CIA communication protocols at a level that threatened every Western asset operating behind the Iron Curtain. Extraction was impossible. Smirnov never left Soviet territory. Defection was unthinkable. He was a true believer, second-generation KGB, ideologically committed. Surveillance was airtight. He traveled with a rotating security detail, lived in a state apartment with monitored phone lines, and maintained operational security that impressed even CIA analysts reviewing intercepts. The only vulnerability identified through 18 months of surveillance was personal rather than procedural. Smirnov had a documented pattern of pursuing romantic relationships with ministry staff. Never coercive, always consensual, but consistent. He preferred women who appeared vulnerable, emotionally accessible, subordinate in rank. Intelligence psychiatrists called it a control fetish disguised as charm. Conventional assassination methods were evaluated and rejected. Firearms left ballistic evidence. Poisons detectable in 1985. Soviet toxicology triggered investigations. Staged accidents required infrastructure the CIA didn't have in Moscow. Every approach carried unacceptable risk of attribution. The trigger came on October 14, 1985. Smirnov was promoted again, this time to a position that granted him permanent immunity from prosecution and direct access to the Politburo's intelligence briefings. The assessment from Langley was clinical. If Smirnov consolidated this position, American intelligence operations in Eastern Europe would be compromised for a generation. Planning ended. Execution was authorized under Presidential Finding 85-7-November. Authority was compartmentalized. Fewer than 12 people knew the operation existed. The decision to activate Volkov came with full acknowledgement of what it meant. She would have no exfiltration plan. Success assumed she would remain in place, living next to what she'd done for years. Psychological assessments predicted a 30% chance of operational breakdown within 6 months of execution. Command authorized anyway. During the authorization briefing, one detail appeared in the operational summary that would later haunt the case officers involved. Volkov, when informed of the mission via coded message embedded in a library book checkout slip, sent back only 3 words through the same channel. Understood. No concerns. The human cost of intelligence work is usually measured in captured agents or failed operations. Sometimes it's measured in what a person agrees to become. Intercepted KGB communications from September 1985 reveal Smirnov discussing his daughter's upcoming 8th birthday. He wanted to find a specific doll she'd seen in a gum department store window. Analysts noted nothing operationally relevant. The doll was expensive, imported from East Germany, and Smirnov called 3 contacts trying to locate one before the party. He succeeded. Surveillance photos from the birthday party show a child holding the doll, Smirnov smiling beside her. When the operation concluded, the child would lose her father. Intelligence tradecraft doesn't account for dolls. By November 8, 1985, the operation entered its execution phase. The triggering event was Smirnov's confirmed attendance at a ministry-sponsored social gathering scheduled for November 12th. The event would take place in a private apartment near the Arbat. Limited guest list, minimal security presence. The window was 4 days. The infrastructure required for Operation Crimson Kiss was deliberately minimal. Complex operations leave complex evidence. The CIA's Technical Services Division designed the mission around a single principle. The weapon must be indistinguishable from the method of delivery until the moment of use. Device L-19 was a modified lipstick applicator, externally identical to a Leningrad cosmetics factory product, sold in state stores across Moscow. The modification existed in the internal chamber. Instead of cosmetic pigment, the tube contained a gel matrix suspension holding 0.5 milligrams of tetrodotoxin, a neurotoxin sourced from Pacific pufferfish tissue. The compound blocks sodium channels in nerve cells, causing paralysis and cardiac failure. In 1985, Soviet toxicology protocols couldn't detect it. The chemical signature resembled natural cardiac arrest. Activation required specific conditions, sustained pressure and body heat for a minimum of 3 seconds. Translation: a kiss, not contact, not proximity. A deliberate, extended kiss. The delivery method created a psychological barrier that functioned as operational security. The operative would have to choose the moment. No accidents were possible. The gel formulation was designed by Dr. Margaret Chen, a chemist working under contract at Fort Detrick. She later described the assignment as the most disturbing of her career. Not because of the lethality, but because of the intimacy required. The dosage calculations assumed mucosal absorption through lip tissue. Too much would cause immediate symptoms and trigger investigation. Too little would fail entirely. The margin was 0.1 milligrams. Supporting infrastructure was equally precise. Volkov's cover identity underwent Legend Revision Echo 7, a subtle biographical adjustment filed through forged ministry personnel updates. Status: recently divorced. Reason: husband relocated to Vladivostok for work. Marriage dissolved quietly. This made her emotionally accessible without appearing desperate, vulnerable without seeming damaged. One communications officer operated from Helsinki, receiving coded transmissions via shortwave radio buried in weather reports. One technical officer remained in Vienna, holding the only backup dose of tetrodotoxin in case device L-19 failed or was lost. In Moscow, Volkov operated alone. No local handler, no surveillance team, no backup. Compartmentalization meant survival. If she were caught, no one else would burn. The team structure violated standard operational doctrine, which required redundancy and real-time oversight. The choice was intentional. Multiple operatives meant multiple exposure points. This operation required a single point of contact and complete deniability. Volkov knew only her role. The Helsinki officer knew only that an asset would transmit success or failure via coded phrase. The Vienna officer knew only to wait. The planning consumed 3 weeks. By November 10th, device L-19 had been delivered to Volkov through a dead drop in Gorky Park, hidden inside a box of imported Belgian chocolates left on a specific bench. She retrieved it at 17:30 hours, confirmed receipt through a chalk mark on a telephone pole, and returned to her apartment. From that moment, she had 48 hours before the social event. The compound would remain stable for 72 hours after activation, giving her one opportunity. During those 48 hours, Volkov experienced what CIA psychologists call legend drift, the cognitive dissonance when false identity feels more real than original self. In her post-operation debriefing, conducted 9 months later through an encrypted channel, she described rehearsing the application of the lipstick 17 times in her apartment bathroom. Not for mechanical proficiency. She knew how to apply lipstick. She rehearsed to convince herself that the woman in the mirror was someone capable of what came next. The mission continued. November 12th, 1985. The social gathering began at 1900 hours in a 4th-floor apartment on Starokonyusheny Lane, 3 blocks from the Arbat. The host was a deputy minister celebrating a promotion. Attendance was 60 people, mostly ministry staff and mid-level officials. Smirnov arrived at 1945 hours, alone, his security detail dismissed for the evening. This was a professional social event, not a state function. His presence signaled confidence. Volkov arrived 20 minutes earlier, wearing a gray wool dress purchased from a State Department store. Minimal jewelry, low heels. Her appearance communicated exactly what her legend required. Respectable, modest, unremarkable. The lipstick, device L19, remained in her purse. She would apply it only when proximity had been established. First contact occurred at 2000 hours. Smirnov noticed her because she didn't notice him. She stood near a window, drinking Georgian wine, speaking to no one. He approached using a standard conversational opening, a comment about the cold weather, a question about which department she worked in. Volkov responded with practiced diffidence. Not dismissive, not eager, accessible. Complications emerged within 30 minutes. A junior KGB officer named Petrov, someone Volkov recognized from ministry security rotations, positioned himself near their conversation. He wasn't surveillance. He was networking, trying to impress a superior. But his presence meant witnesses, and witnesses meant complications. The window narrowed. Smirnov's interest intensified around 2100 hours. He touched her elbow while reaching for a drink. He leaned closer when speaking, reducing the distance. Standard escalation, textbook seduction mechanics. Volkov played her role precisely. Hesitant, but not resistant. Flattered, but not forward. She mentioned needing to leave soon, an early meeting tomorrow. This created scarcity. At 2240 hours, Smirnov made the proposal. Would she like to continue the conversation somewhere quieter? His apartment was nearby, Kutuzovsky Prospect, 10 minutes by car. The phrasing was careful, genteel, designed to allow refusal without embarrassment. Volkov hesitated exactly long enough to seem uncertain, then agreed. The execution window opened at 2317 hours when Smirnov dismissed his driver outside the apartment building. Surveillance protocols required drivers to remain on standby for senior officials. Dismissing the driver was a personal choice, a signal that Smirnov intended privacy. It also meant no witnesses to Volkov's arrival. They entered the building alone. The elevator to the 9th floor took 40 seconds. Smirnov's apartment was spacious by Soviet standards. 3 rooms, western-facing windows, furniture that suggested access to restricted distribution channels. He offered cognac. Volkov accepted. This was the most dangerous phase, not because of surveillance, but because Smirnov was charming. He spoke about literature, asked about her opinions on Pasternak, listened when she answered. The humanity threatened discipline. 2358 hours. Physical proximity established. They sat on a sofa facing the windows. Moscow's lights spread below them, distant and indifferent. Smirnov leaned toward her. The moment required one more element. Volkov excused herself to the bathroom. 003 hours. She stood before the mirror. The same mirror. Rehearsal she'd performed 17 times in her own apartment. Except now the consequences were real. She removed device L19 from her purse, broke the safety seal with a thumbnail, and applied the modified lipstick. The gel felt identical to normal cosmetic wax. Her reflection showed nothing unusual. She returned to the living room. 007 hours. Smirnov initiated the kiss. Duration, 4 seconds. Tetrodotoxin transferred through mucosal contact, entering his bloodstream through the lip tissue. The absorption was immediate. The effect was delayed. The tradecraft requirement was restraint. No second contact. No extended intimacy. Volkov pulled back gently, cited the late hour, mentioned the early meeting she'd referenced at the party. Smirnov accepted this with disappointment. but not suspicion. He offered to call a taxi. She declined, said she'd walk to the metro. It wasn't far. He walked her to the door. They didn't kiss again. Volkov exited the building at 0019 hours. The night was cold, -8 degrees Celsius, snow beginning to fall. She walked 4 blocks before allowing herself to breathe fully. Then she walked 6 more blocks before stopping, standing in the shadow of a closed bakery, shaking so violently she had to lean against the wall. This moment doesn't appear in operational reports. She included it in her debriefing 9 months later because she wanted someone to know that she'd understood what she'd done. At 0126 hours, Boris Smirnov collapsed in his apartment. Tetrodotoxin disrupts the sodium channels that regulate nerve impulses. The heart, a muscle dependent on electrical signals, fails. Consciousness fades within 90 seconds. Death follows within 4 to 6 minutes. There is no pain, only confusion and then absence. The vulnerability exploited wasn't access. It was arrogance. Smirnov believed desire equaled control, that a subordinate woman posed no threat, that intimacy made him safer rather than more exposed. This assumption killed him. At 0855 hours the next morning, Volkov was back at her desk in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, typing memos about trade delegation schedules. Ambulances cleared Kutuzovsky Prospect at 0940 hours. She heard about Smirnov's death during lunch break when a colleague mentioned the tragedy. She expressed appropriate surprise. Someone said heart attack. Someone else said he was too young. Volkov said nothing more. By 1400 hours on November 13th, KGB pathologists had conducted a preliminary examination of Smirnov's body. The official cause of death was listed as acute myocardial infarction, heart attack. No external wounds, no signs of struggle. Toxicology screening, limited by 1985 Soviet capabilities, detected nothing unusual. The case file noted one irregularity. Smirnov had no family history of cardiac disease and maintained above-average fitness. But irregularities aren't evidence. Smirnov's death was ruled natural within 24 hours. Officially, no investigation. Privately, KGB analysts flagged inconsistencies. A counterintelligence colonel dying hours after attending a social event, alone in his apartment, days after a major promotion. The timing suggested possibility. But possibility without evidence is paranoia, and paranoia without direction is useless. Volkov was interviewed twice, both times as part of routine canvassing of ministry personnel who'd attended the party. The first interview lasted 11 minutes, the second, 18. Questions were polite, procedural. Had she spoken with Colonel Smirnov? Briefly. Had she noticed anything unusual about his behavior? No. Had she left the party alone? Yes. The interviewers thanked her for her time. Nothing in her demeanor suggested deception because deception had been her profession for 7 years. Every lead ended in absence. No witnesses to Volkov's visit to Smirnov's apartment. The driver had been dismissed. No surveillance footage. The building's cameras had been broken for weeks, a common occurrence in Moscow apartment complexes. No forensic evidence linking her to the scene. She touched nothing unnecessary. Worn gloves when handling the lipstick tube, which she'd dissolved in acetone and flushed hours before the interviews. The Soviet Union issued no public statement. Smirnov received a state funeral with full honors. His daughter, the one who'd received the East German doll, stood beside her mother at the graveside. Intelligence agencies on both sides monitored for reactions but said nothing. The silence was transparent to those in the field. But transparency wasn't the point. Deniability was. The strategic impact was immediate and cascading. Smirnov's counterintelligence network had been built around personal relationships and institutional knowledge that died with him. His replacement, appointed within 2 weeks, lacked the same operational intuition and spent months rebuilding compromised source networks. During that window, 2 American intelligence officers trapped in Eastern Europe exfiltrated via Austria. A third, awaiting trial in Warsaw, was included in a prisoner exchange that wouldn't have been possible if Smirnov had remained alive to block diplomatic channels. The tactical objective, neutralize Smirnov, was accomplished with zero attribution and complete deniability. The strategic benefit was measured in saved assets and restored operational tempo across Eastern Europe. Intelligence gained from the 2 exfiltrated officers included details on Warsaw Pact, military communications protocols, and KGB recruiting methodologies that influenced Western counterintelligence for the next 3 years. But operations have costs beyond diplomatic tension or blown covers. The method used in Operation Crimson Kiss, intimacy weaponized through proximity assassination, created unintended consequences that rippled through Moscow's bureaucratic culture. Within 6 months, KGB leadership quietly implemented new protocols for senior officers attending social events. Relationships between officials and subordinates faced increased scrutiny. Female ministry staff found themselves sidelined from professional gatherings, viewed as potential security risks rather than colleagues. The operation succeeded tactically while contributing to systemic distrust that harmed the very people Volkov's legend had been designed to resemble. Volkov remained in place until 1989. She continued her work as a ministry secretary, typed memos, attended fewer social functions. Her performance reviews remained unremarkable. She developed no close friendships. Surveillance detected no suspicious activity. From the CIA's perspective, she was a burned asset too valuable to extract, too dangerous to contact, existing in permanent standby. The calculation from Langley was that the operation's benefits outweighed its costs. Smirnov's network collapsed. American assets survived. Soviet counterintelligence operations against Western targets slowed measurably. Whether this proved correct would become clear over the following years as the Cold War entered its final phase and the calculus of acceptable sacrifice became harder to justify. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Volkov vanished. She didn't appear on any defection lists. She didn't resurface in Western intelligence databases. One former case officer later claimed she'd emigrated to Canada under a third identity, working as a translator. Another believed she'd died in Moscow during the chaotic transition period. Neither theory was confirmed. The only trace recovered was her notebook of fabricated memories, found in an abandoned Moscow apartment during the archival chaos of the early 90s. The notebook that she'd filled with false details about a life she'd never lived, studied like scripture to maintain her legend. CIA officers who reviewed it discovered something unexpected. Every page was blank. Either she'd never written anything, or she'd erased it all. The difference matters, but no one knows which is true. The moral paradox of Operation Crimson Kiss doesn't resolve cleanly. From one perspective, Volkov prevented further intelligence losses and neutralized a ruthless counterintelligence officer responsible for exposing American agents who faced imprisonment or worse. Smirnov's work wasn't abstract. People suffered because of his effectiveness. Removing him saved lives. From another perspective, Volkov weaponized trust and eliminated a man without trial, without due process, using a method that corrupted the most human act, intimacy, desire, connection, into a delivery system for assassination. She turned vulnerability into lethality. Smirnov believed he was safe in that moment, believed the woman with him was genuine, believed intimacy meant something other than death. The question becomes this: When intelligence agencies transform intimacy into a weapon. When they train operatives to simulate connection while delivering poison, does preventing greater harm justify destroying the last space between two people where trust should mean safety? Does the calculus of saved lives outweigh the corruption of human connection itself? The answer reveals more about your worldview than about Volkov or Smirnov or the operation that connected them. Some see necessary evil in service of defending democratic societies against authoritarian intelligence services. Others see the abandonment of moral constraints that separates intelligence work from mere murder. What's your take on proximity assassination that requires intimacy as the delivery method? Does the target's own actions, pursuing someone he believed vulnerable, change the moral weight? Or does the deliberate exploitation of human connection cross a line that strategic necessity can't justify? Drop your perspective in the comments. If this story made you reconsider where the line falls between intelligence work and something darker, hit that like button and share this with someone who thinks they know where their own line is. Most people don't know until they're asked to cross it.